Hello, Zoom people. Hello, centre people. Greetings. Thanks very much for introducing me. Thanks, Saravanti, for inviting me. So the invitation was to come and talk about something to do with my Dharma life. Was that roughly speaking? That's it. So the talk I offered to give, I actually gave it a title, I think, which is Poetry, Woodland and Solitude, Living a Dharma Life Outdoors. And the reason I chose that was I knew that I'd be coming immediately after a period spent on retreat. So I spent 4 weeks on retreat outdoors recently. So that's what's on my mind at the moment. I could just as well do a talk called something like Buddhist doctrines, dead languages, and books. Living a Dharma life indoors. But that's for the winter, isn't it? It's quite nice to give some sort of talk on the Dharma life outdoors. Now, as you can see, I don't have a piece of paper with any points on it. I've just got some ideas. So I was on a solitary retreat for 2 weeks, and then I joined a 2-week meditation retreat. So I'll tell you a bit about what I did, because for some of you, the idea of retreats might be one that is not so well known. So I thought I'd just tell you a bit about what I was doing and then fill that in with my impressions and so on. So perhaps I'll invite Darren now to put up some PowerPoint slides. Look at that. Lovely. So here's a photo of my tent on the riverbank of the River Dart in Devon. So perhaps some of you know Buckfast Abbey in Devon. It's this English Benedictine monastery. Looks medieval, but in fact it was built in the 20th century, a kind of reconstruction of a medieval monastery. And I started visiting Buckfast when I was 18. I was interested in Catholicism at that time and really enjoyed getting to know the monks and experiencing their contemplative way of life. Well, all that is a long time in the past now. After I converted to Buddhism, I kept visiting. But it's a bit different now. But at a certain point in 2003, I asked the monks, can I camp on the riverbank? So this is a mile upriver from the monastery. And you can see the River Dart there. The River Dart flows from Dartmoor, up on the moors, down through beautiful woodland. It's quite a fast flowing river. Through beautiful woodland down through Totnes, second New Age centre of the UK after Glastonbury, and then down to the sea. And I was talking earlier with Saravanti about a swimming competition that is held at Totnes, swimming along the river to the sea. So as you can see, my tent is not surrounded by any other humans there. So I was camping on my own on the riverbank, and I do this every year. So you might wonder, well, what's the idea of a solitary retreat? Or maybe you've heard of the idea of people going on solitary retreats. Now, usually people go to nice, comfortable huts or solitary retreat facilities. And they even have such miracles as magical dustbins, which is to say that their solitary retreat facility will have a dustbin and they put a list in it of the foods they like. And some kind person who runs this thing gives them the food they like. Whereas I didn't have any magical dustbin, I just had the local co-op So it's a bit unusual actually for Buddhists to go on camping solitaries. I think the reason is, and you can imagine this, it's relatively uncomfortable. You have to be the kind of person who doesn't mind sleeping on uneven ground, getting bitten by all sorts of creatures, perhaps not having hot showers and having to get your own food. But for me, camping out of doors, going on retreat out of doors in remote locations has always been really attractive. In the 90s, I used to go up to Scotland, to Glen Affric, where there's an enormous ancient woodland of Scots pines, and set up my tent in Glen Affric, miles from anywhere. It was an 8-mile trek to the shop. It was. I couldn't do it anymore. Actually, it's too exhausting. But it was I found it life-changing to spend that time immersed in the Highlands. I spent 6 weeks there once, and after a while, when I saw other people, I think, oh look, there's humans, and they make these particular human noises. Can you imagine humans? They make a sort of chattering bird sound. And then you hear, of course, it's language. You know, I do language as well, but humans are very particular. And this talk is, I promised, poetry. So I'm going to read a poem. Now, this poem is by me. It's the only one by me. Don't fear too much. But this poem I wrote in Glen Affric in 1996, and it's important to me, to my heart. It's the beginning of what I think of as writing poetry in a serious way. And it's a poem marking the way in which camping in solitude in the Highlands touched on my life in a significant way. So it's called Forest Path. Forest Path. A moment when, suddenly, looking back for the way to the future, you quiver on the edge of yourself. All paths panic beneath you. The motherlode of meaning splits, gusts east in grits. The sun throws unmanageable glances, blinding off the choppy water, and spray plumes off, twisting into empty blue. And you turn to find yourself on the winding forest path. Yes, a violet poses against a leaf, and alarmed wrens flitter in birches. Now you cling breathless on a few memories, a mug of tea, but you know they are not your home. So I put it in the second person, as if it's about somebody else, because I thought it's a universal kind of experience, perhaps, that after a while, just camping in nature, something in you that's not civilized, that's perhaps more closer to nature, just emerges, and you feel human civilization as something added, something extra. And in that feeling, there's a sense of letting go into what it is to be human in a way that's much closer to perhaps our bodies, to the majority of our human evolutionary history, much closer to life. So there you go. I think that's one of the things I particularly appreciate about camping solitaries, is the sense in which, as a human being, I shed some of the skin of being civilized and, as it were, exist in a more naked way. So this brings up this idea of what is it for humans to be civilized? What is it to live in cities and so on? What's is that good or bad or what? And I thought to talk about that, I might read you another poem that's all right, not by me. This one's by R.S. Thomas. I was having great fun choosing some poems this afternoon. Bit of a rush, but I found some favourites. So R.S. Thomas, anybody heard of R.S. Thomas? He died in 2000. He was a Welsh poet who wrote in English, but through his life, he increasingly would only speak Welsh and would only live in Welsh-speaking places. And if anybody spoke English to him, he'd say things like, "No English." He was the most weird, miserable sort of Welsh English. Anyway, he started off in Hanmer, just by Tarralog. He was a priest in the church in Wales. And his poetry, you could say, is often a kind of existentialist Christian musing on the absence of God. But also, in his early work, he wrote a lot about the people of Wales, the hardy peasant farmers of Wales. He turns them into heroes. Or are they heroes? Or what are they? So here's one of these poems. Does anybody speak Welsh? Anybody Welsh speakers? Anyway, this poem is called Cynthilyn on a Tractor. Cynthilyn on a Tractor. Now, I don't know if I'm saying Cynthilyn correct. Anyway, he's one of these peasant farmers that R.S. Thomas likes to talk about. Ah, you should see Cynthilyn on a tractor. Gone, the old look that yoked him to the soil. He's a new man now, part of the machine. His nerves of metal and his blood oil. The clutch curses, but the gears obey his least bidding. And lo, he's away, out to the farmyard, scattering hens. Riding to work now as a great man should. He is the knight of arms, breaking the field's mirror of silence, emptying the wood of foxes and squirrels and bright jays. The sun comes over the tall trees, kindling all the hedges, but not for him who runs his engine on a different fuel. And all the birds are singing, bills wide in vain, as Cynthilyn passes proudly up the lane. So R.S. Thomas, he's very fond of these characters, but is he positive? He's a peasant farmer who's acquired a new tractor and thereby taken another step to alienate himself from nature. And yet, for Cynthilyn, this is a bit of progress, isn't it? I think there's this ambivalence about human civilization. It goes really deeply into what it is to be human. On the one hand, to become free of drought and famine and illness and so on. It liberates us to think, write poetry, practice the Dharma. On the other hand, we, to some degree, lose touch with a direct connection with the earth, our home, and all the living connections that go with it. And it's quite hard to maintain that connection. So R.S. Thomas kind of is great at exploring that ambiguity. I'm saying that because in no way am I suggesting that, all Buddhists should go off and live in tents by the River Dart and switch off their phones and have nothing to do with modern life. It's not that simple, is it? Here we are, with the wonders of Zoom, able to connect together. And this is very marvelous. But if that's the whole of our lives, then it could be something's lost. So for me, at least, I find it really wonderful or beneficial to go and spend some time in nature, alone, without any devices, just with a posh tent and a trangia various, I even have a fold-up chair these days because my knees aren't as good as they used to. But, it's closer, isn't it? And what are the kind of things that happen there? Well, of course, you get bitten by small insects. You get rained upon. Last year, that river, so beautiful, so shining, golden, so rose after rain and flooded me out. I dragged the tent up away from the river just in time. But it's not that nature loves us, is it? It's not that the natural world cares about us necessarily. We're just humans, along with all the other creatures. And yet that very experience of being in nature is one that humbles us and reminds us of what it is to be human, to have a body which is warm-blooded and we have to look after. And of course, the Buddha and the early disciples of the Buddha lived completely outdoors. It's a bit different in India. It's a lot warmer. They have cold snaps. Anybody been to India? Any cold snap? It's pretty cold, isn't it? It's pretty chilly. Even the Buddha mentions the 8-day period of frost. It's quite common in ancient India in the winter. Of course, they don't have any heating. You just feel very cold for 8 days, and then it warms up again. So in this country, of course, it's much less comfortable. It would be hard to live outdoors in the way the Buddha did. But I'm mentioning that for the Buddha and his disciples, it was quite normal to practice outdoors, to find a tree or an empty dwelling to meditate under. That was the context for their Dharma practice. It was hardly ever meeting in rooms together. And this has an effect on how meditation goes. I think we can sometimes get the impression when we learn about Buddhism or Buddhist meditation that really top meditation is the kind of meditation where you become deeply absorbed and silent. And to achieve that kind of meditation, you need very specific conditions. You don't want traffic noise, you don't want cats sitting on you, you don't want interruptions, you need lots of space and so on. And I don't doubt for a minute the value of this kind of deeply absorbed meditation, at least for some people. Some people find it very refreshing, in fact transformative. But I'd say there's another kind of meditation, and this is what I'm more attracted to. It's when, in the peace and quiet of nature, you become more attuned to what's actually going on outside of yourself. So a much more open way of meditating, where you sit open to the elements, to the bird song, to the movements of creatures, to the flowing of the river. And for me, this is, I think, just as valid a form of meditation. It takes the same kinds of discipline, the discipline of paying attention to the body, keeping on returning attention to the breath, to whatever one's object is. And in a way, learning to navigate your own tendencies to become distracted and so on. But what can happen in that open form of sitting is that you come into a relationship. You come into a relationship with what's happening around you, rather than in a deeply absorbed state in which your attention is more deeply just in your own inner life. And that relationship can, in its own way, become quite transformative. So we'll stick with this image. Oh, can we have the next image then, Darren? So another thing that happens on solitary camping retreats, in fact, any kind of trip into nature really, but more obviously when you're there day after day, is you realize who's the visitor. Yeah, who's the new guy here? And of course, you've just pitched up 2 weeks or a year or whatever, in the home of all the other beings that usually live in that part of the world. So here is an image. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it beautiful? So I don't know how I did this. My phone must have managed to take this picture, this photo. It doesn't normally manage to take good photos. So here's a shield bug. I think it's on my jeans. It looks like denim, doesn't it? But highly magnified. Shield bug, teeny tiny shield bug. And there it is. I was where it lives. So there it was exploring me. But this is, I had to do a bit of research on this. It's a shield bug of the species Elasmophytus interstinctus. They don't even have English names. They're so, people are so disconnected from this particular shield bug. But it's not even an adult. This is the 4th instar. So some insects, like butterflies, start off in a larval stage, caterpillar eating, then they pupate and the butterfly emerges. I mean, that's weird enough, isn't it? Imagine your whole body dissolving and then you wake up in a completely different shape. Pretty weird life. Well, shield bugs, like a lot of insects, they don't do exactly that. Instead, they shed one skin and grow a new one that's slightly bigger. These are called instars, but often they're different colors, shapes, different patterns. So this is the second last instar of this species. And living where the shield bugs live, you begin to think, wow, so being human, I just got born as a small version of myself and then grew. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? But insects do something so much crazier and stranger. And aren't living beings strange? And yet for them, it's quite normal, isn't it? For them, they think, oh, weird to be born as like a small version of you. They actually would presumably prefer just to go through this very complicated process. It's very hard. I'm not a great photographer, so I just shared with you my best photo of a creature. But lots of other creatures. Of course, I'm in their house. I'm in their home, so they come and visit one way or another. A pretty common visitor when you're camping like this is the humble field mouse. I'm sure all of you have seen a field mouse. In every woods, there must be hundreds and thousands of these. And after a few days, takes a few days, they come and check you out. They're very curious. They're mammals. They're just like us. They want to know what's happening. And this year, my field mouse was very polite. He didn't, or she, didn't chew any holes in my tent, as they sometimes do, because they're interested in the food that I've got in the tent. This time, came in, poked around, and just chewed things. Chewed yellow things, actually, to be precise. And I've got a way of working with mice these days. I buy them off with muesli, which goes in just outside the door of the tent. You can imagine they're very happy to eat the muesli. And on my last night this year, but they maintain their curiosity. And this year, on my last night there, I was asleep, but I can remember it now. So I think perhaps when we're asleep, we can sometimes remember it if we then wake up. Anyway, skitter, skitter, skitter. And I had 2 feet on my forehead. And of course, but I experienced it from the mouse's point of view. What would it be like if you were a mouse to put 2 feet on a warm, smooth skin? You'd think, uh-oh. And the mouse just ran off at this point in a panic. So, you start to feel for these creatures, don't you? What it's like to meet humans. So it's very nice to meet mice, especially because they didn't damage anything. But this year, if I may just end with a blessing. I've been camping on the Dark Valley riverbank for, this was the 9th time. And over that whole time, I've very much wanted to meet an otter. And this year, I was meditating underneath an oak tree in the morning, looking out over the river, and an otter just swam up the river, as they do. So they kind of keep their noses up, then they dive down and the tail comes up. And it just swam upriver, actually quite oblivious to me. And when in this kind of situation, my feeling is that it's quite natural to feel a blessing, a sense of blessing from the natural world when things like this happen. Or at least that's my experience. I'd say that this is actually quite typical for more animist cultures all over the world, that their experience of non-human creatures is often connected with meaning. So I'd suggest that probably for all humans of an animist sort, meeting an otter like that would have a sense of blessing. You think, I must be doing something right to be visited by an otter. I had the good fortune to meet Darren and Karen at the, is it Karen? I've got the right, great, thanks, at the Bodhi Festival, where we spent a lot of time. I was running some study groups, and we spent a lot of time talking about animism and Buddhism. So I'm hoping you can understand the otter encounter. One last thought about the life outdoors, practicing the Dharma life outdoors in this context of the solitary retreat kind of format. It's sometimes said, it used to be said at Padma in the men's ordination training program, at least, that going on solitaries was good because it helps you cultivate individuality. Is that kind of thing still said? You never heard it. No, maybe it's back in the 90s. So you used to get told what to do quite a lot. You should go on solitary retreat, be an individual. But actually it's true, I think. So one of the great things about solitary retreats, you take yourself away to some place, and it's completely up to you how you spend your days. You can get up when you like, go to bed when you like, you can meditate or not, as you please. You can feel your way into what Dharma practice is for you, what it means for you. And this is very unusual and valuable. And I personally, over the years, have come to really appreciate the opportunity to spend a couple of weeks away from other people, away from civilization, from shops and all the rest of it, just feeling my way into what's the attractive thing to do now? Is it to meditate? Is it to swim in the river? Is it to read some Dharma book? Or just relax? And so I'm just sharing some very positive things about solitary retreat. So could we have the next slide, Darren? But this year I did something unusual. I drove in my electric car, which I've hired over the summer, which I'm really pleased about, as you can tell. I don't normally like driving cars, but electric cars feel harmless somehow. So I drove from Devon up to Somerset. I haven't done this before. Went from a solitary retreat to an organised meditation retreat. I wanted to tell you a bit about this place. This big house you see here is called Alfoxden House. Some of you may have heard about it because I know Akash Raj has been down there with Sam, his son. Maybe others here have been on work retreats or such like. It was bought last year by a Tree Ratner charity. That's the way to put it, isn't it? Of course, our charities are all independent. So there's a Alfoxden Park House Trust, which is the charity which owns this house. It's pretty much derelict. It's an old hotel. It doesn't look too derelict there, but believe me, it's really rubbish. There's, you can go in the door and there's an acro prop holding up the first floor. They've put in some cables and water and stuff. So there's a kitchen, and you can sort of do a few things in the house, but you wouldn't want to spend too long there. So as you can see, we had a meditation dome on the former croquet lawn. How appropriate, huh? So that dome in the foreground was our meditation room. And the leader is called Paramananda. Some of you may have come across Paramananda. He's one of our Triratna meditation teachers, and he wrote a best-selling book called Change Your Mind, and a recent book called The Myth of Meditation, in which he presents very much his own take on meditation. He's very anti-technique, very pro developing a soulful connection with meditation. So I went from a solitary retreat to a meditation retreat with other people. And I very much appreciated this shift from being able to do my own thing as an individual to participating in a retreat in a Sangha context, in the context of a spiritual community of fellow meditators. For me, it was an ideal balance. So those of you who've been on meditation retreat will perhaps know there's the support of meditating together, of a kind of program of meditation. You know when to turn up, there's bells and so on. There's the value of leading, and there's living together on a meditation retreat. That's what's, I think, I particularly appreciated this year. I spent the last year in my flat on my own in the midst of the pandemic, working from home, and I've really missed the kind of companionship that you get on in the Buddhist context, and especially on these kinds of meditation retreats. This, I think, one of the things that's particularly enjoyable about meditation retreats is that when one goes into silence together with a community, there's a sense of being human beings together, but somehow learning to work together on the non-verbal level, noticing each other's movements, each other's needs and interests, but not needing to chat about it, just supporting each other in whatever way you can. Maybe it's just by washing up, or maybe it's by doing one's job, or whatever. So that was a real treat after a couple of years of not being able to attend. There was a direct connection with my practice on the solitary retreat, in that Paramananda, his particular take on meditation, his particular offering, it's changed slightly now, is one in which he emphasizes the importance of just relaxing and appreciating what it is to be a human being in a body on the earth. That's where he starts from. It's the very opposite of an approach which starts from willpower. You could develop meditation, great meditation experiences by following this technique. Perhaps that's of some benefit for a lot of people. I'm not saying this is somehow wrong or anything like that, but the way Paramananda teaches meditation, starting from relaxing out of your normal tendency to make an effort and try to achieve things, takes you into a very different relationship with meditation and with what can happen in meditation. And what that led to was an experience in meditation in which the aim, the point of meditating as a Buddhist was clearly not really to get away from ourselves or in any way to transcend our normal experience, but rather to come into relationship with it. And that, of course, takes us into relationship with the natural world. So it seems to me, I'm getting more and more keen on this, I suppose, because I was, as a young practitioner, at least inclined to put a lot of effort into having meditation experiences that transcended what is normally happening. These days, I'm more and more inclined to think of meditation in terms of coming into relationship with nature. Could we have the next slide, please? And Alfoxden is historically extremely important for English literary history because William Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy lived there for a year, and together with Coleridge produced an extremely important book of poems called Lyrical Ballads, a turning point in English literature. If anyone's interested in learning more, me and Vishvapani are leading a retreat on the poetry of Wordsworth and Coleridge down at Alfoxden, starting the 11th of September for a week. But also at Alfoxden, just by the house, just behind the tree here, is Alfoxden House, is a tree, an oak tree, obviously pollarded over the centuries. You can see it's that's why it's lived so long. And Jayaraja, who's in charge down at Alfoxden, he got a tree guardian along. A tree guardian is a thing, apparently. And what I mean is it's a self-appointed, like a tree whisperer. Is this, anybody heard of tree guardians? I'd never heard of them before. Anyway, he came by, the tree guardian came by, very impressed, and decided that the tree is 916 years old. It didn't count the rings, thank goodness. So it does feel like it's a tree that's 916 years old. There's no human being to give you a sense of scale. It's about 12 feet wide, about 4 meters wide, I suppose. So almost every day, the retreat would gather around this oak tree, and we'd perform various rituals, sometimes connected with the Buddha, but more connected with oak trees. In some ways, it's a bit odd having the, well, no, it's a good thing that the Buddha's very small and the oak tree is very big here. So meditating at Alfoxden gives the sense of coming into relationship with these great beings like this oak tree, which has been around for a very long time, older than the house, older than any of the local dwellings. One's meditation there is one in which you can't help but feel a sense of humans sort of visiting this area and participating in a much greater process. The deer park at Alfoxden probably hasn't been maintained for hundreds of years. The deer have probably been mainly undisturbed for centuries. Though there's been a hotel there, the deer park's very large and ancient. So it was tremendous for me to, we were camping and to do rituals outdoors around this oak tree with a community, and to feel that not just me as an individual, but as a community of Buddhist practitioners, we were coming into a relationship with the trees and the world of nature in our meditation. Is that the last slide? Yes. I'm going to finish just by mentioning one image. So perhaps just the first slide of the second slideshow, Darren. Thanks very much. I'm now going to slip very, very briefly into the kind of thing I was leading study on at the Buddha Field Festival, and that I'm generally leading study on at the moment. Can we go back to that first slide? Previous, thank you. That's it. So the Buddha and the Bodhi tree. Here's a very ancient plaque from Thailand, 7th to 9th century, representing, you can see the Buddha meditating under the Bodhi tree. And I just wanted to mention that this image is one that's really central to Buddhism. And yet I think that there's a lot more that we could do with it and appreciate about it. So I'll just mention one or two things. Firstly, you can see that the Buddha is seated under the Bodhi tree, represented there as a set of leaves with a couple of worshippers to each side. Now, in some ways, this does signify or represent something, as it were, historical, or at least naturalistic, that the Buddha presumably did meditate underneath a tree in ancient India, because trees provide shelter and they provide a sort of natural context of support for the meditation process. I was mentioned myself. It's very good to meditate under trees. And yet there's a deeper symbolism, which is actually the reason why it's so valuable for us and why it's such an important part of Buddhist art. And this symbolism is that the Bodhi tree doesn't represent just a tree like our mighty oak at our Foxton, but rather it represents a tree of the imagination. It represents the world tree, that mythic or archetypal tree which represents the whole of nature or holds up the whole of nature. So this isn't a real tree. We're talking about a tree like Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, the cosmic ash tree in which the hells and the heavens and the human realm are all located. And it's of really central importance, I think, to the myth of the Buddha's awakening, that his awakening takes place at the root of the Bodhi tree. Not just any tree, not just, it could have been there, it could have been somewhere else, but it had to take place at this point. The Buddha had to be at this spot, at the base of the tree of life, as it were, in relationship with this symbol of nature as a whole. Maybe we could just skip through one or two slides. This is the naturalistic vision. So if you keep going through, if you carry on. Maybe keep going. Here's Yggdrasil, a cosmic ash tree from Norse mythology. So obviously the Bodhi tree isn't like this. The Bodhi tree is more the place where the Buddha becomes enlightened, and yet it shares characteristics with Yggdrasil in representing the whole cosmos, in as much as the Buddha is located at the center of things in relationship with the whole cosmos. Perhaps you could just skip on and on. And from a 2nd century Buddhist poem called Bodhicharita, the poet explains why the Buddha has to find this spot. He says, "For this is the navel of the planet's skin, endowed with all of its highest powers. For no other place on earth except this could bear the force of his meditation." So The Bodhi tree is also the navel of the planet's skin. It's that central point at which life, as it were, begins and is supported. Perhaps you could go to the next slide and the next one. And just to finish, you can see another very ancient carving of the Bodhi tree from ancient India, from the 1st century, just to give you an idea of how important the symbol of the Bodhi tree was to the Indians, to the ancient Indian Buddhists. So in this sense, this is why it's very important for Western Buddhists perhaps to find their own way of relating to the Buddha and trees. It kind of connects us with archetypal mythology to do with the Buddha and the Bodhi tree and awakening. And in that way, it connects us at an imaginative level, at a felt level. It connects our efforts to develop in meditation with a connection. It connects with a symbol of the whole of the living world. I was going to end with another poem. Shall I just do it? Shall I do it? This is a really quirky end. I mean, I hope that's all right. I mean, I've just riffed anyway, haven't I? I'm going to go to a poem by Louise Gluck here. She's an American poet. Anyone heard of Louise Gluck? She won the Nobel Prize last year, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, this is a poem called The Red Poppy from a volume from '92 called The Wild Iris. And the reason I've chosen it is simply because in this poem and in others, she does something rather astonishing. She lets the flower speak. Yeah, she lets the flower speak. So back to animism. This is like, instead of talking in generalizations about the natural world being alive and so on, here a poet is actually putting words, letting a red poppy just speak. Now, how weird is that? So this is a human being imagining a poppy speaking and us reading this poem and in human words managing to imagine a poppy speaking to us. The red poppy. The great thing is not having a mind. The great thing is not having a mind. Feelings, oh, I have those. They govern me. I have a Lord in heaven called the sun, and open for him, showing him the fire of my own heart, fire like his presence. What could such glory be if not a heart? Oh, my brothers and sisters, were you like me once, long ago, before you were human? Did you permit yourselves to open once, who would never open again? Because in truth, I am speaking now the way you do. I speak because I am shattered. Shall I read it again? So I've chosen this. It's this theme of stepping out of our habitual humanity and experiencing our place in the broader community of living beings. I think this poem is very specifically interesting. The red poppy. The great thing is not having a mind. Feelings, oh, I have those. They govern me. I have a Lord in heaven called the sun, and open for him, showing him the fire of my own heart, fire like his presence. What could such glory be if not a heart? Oh, my brothers and sisters, were you like me once, long ago, before you were human? Did you permit yourselves to open once, who would never open again? Because in truth, I am speaking now, the way you do. I speak because I am shattered. So thank you very much.